Hi, in this video I'll show you how to use the merge function in Power Query. Now Power Query is one of those Excel business intelligence features that give you a lot of capabilities in terms of cleaning up data and putting data together. Now what the merge function does, it takes two tables and the contents of those tables and merges them together. Now there's different types of merges. In the database terminology, they would be called joins. Let me go ahead and show you what we would see when we go ahead and try to merge two tables together. I'm going to show you two tables here. Here, the first table is basically country shipments. Let's pretend that we have items that we're shipping to different countries, and we have these quantity amounts. And I want to merge this together with a country code table. So basically, sometimes you may have different spelling or different ways that a country is written out. But the country code is probably something that's pretty standard. The ISO country code is a 2-digit country code that go ahead and identifies the country based on 2 characters. Now, what we want to do is we want to merge or join these two tables together. And there's different ways we can do it in Power Query. So since I'm already in the country code table, let me go ahead and bring this into Power Query. Now Power Query is an add-on that you may need to download and enable in your version of Excel. So you can go ahead and just Google Power Query Excel and go to the Microsoft site and see what kind of instructions are available for you to do that. But once we have Power Query enabled, we will have a Power Query tab. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and click anywhere in the table here, or this range, and go ahead to Power Query, and I'm going to say get the Excel data from a table. And what it's going to do is it's going to identify that range and convert it into a table. So a table is a specific feature in Excel that gives you some capabilities. Now what it's going to ask for is, does the table have headers? And of course it does have headers. The first row are the headers, the country code and description. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. It's going to turn this range of data into a table and then import it into the query editor in Power Query. Now what I want to do is, this is optional. It's probably a good idea to give your table a name. So I'm going to call this just code. And once it does that, I'm going to go ahead and just close and load this. And I'm going to make it just a connection. So I'm going to go ahead and go to close and load and choose the second option and just make a connection. Just load it only to a connection. So what it does is it's already created that range, or transformed that range into a table and loaded it into a workbook query. So in essence, it's made this range into a table and it's brought it into the workbook query. So what I want to do now is I also want to bring in the other range of data, this country shipments data, into a Power Query. So what I want to do here, if I wanted to just kind of do everything up front and not have to change it later on, I can also just change this range of data into the query, into a table. So what I want to do is go to Insert and Insert Table, or just press Control T. You can see that the keyboard shortcut is here. I can just press Control T, and it's going to also have that Create Table window, and it's going to ask if my table has headers. I'll go ahead and click OK. And once the table is created, I'll have these Table Tools contextual menu, and I can just name my table here. And so I'm just going to go ahead and name this ship, right? And after that is done, we can bring it in as a table. So you can either do this up front and have these tables already brought in to Power Query, or just have Power Query go ahead and look at that range of data and bring it in as a table. So it will automatically create the table, and also you just can name the table if you want to. But either way you can do it. So as long as it's in Power Query Editor as a table, you should be fine, whether or not you create the table beforehand or just let Power Query create the table for you. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just select anywhere within the table. You can see it's all selected. I'm going to go into Power Query and click From Table. And it didn't ask me for that window, right? You don't see that window because it's already created as a table. And if you notice, it brought in that table name here. So basically, that's all done. All I need to do now is go ahead and click Close and Load. And I'm going to close and load and just create a connection here too. I don't want it to output it as a table. It's already a table. All I want to do is create a connection. So now I'm going to go ahead and click load, and it's created 2 connections here, or 2 workbook queries, from the code table and from the ship table. So what I want to do is I want to join these together now. So when I want to join these together, I'm going to go ahead and just join the ship query to the code query, because maybe what I want is to have the code or the country code here as a last column to indicate which countries these are, or what country codes these are. So in Power Query, I can just go ahead and click the merge icon, and it's going to bring up a merge window, and it's going to ask me which tables do I want to merge. So I'm going to merge the ship table. That's going to be the first table I want to merge. That's going to be my primary table I want to merge. I want to merge it to the code table. And there's got to be a common field between these two tables. And the common field actually is going to be the country field. So each table has a country field. Of course, this ship has a country field here, and the code here, this description here, is the country field here. And once that's done, I can go ahead and select some of these options. Now, as I mentioned previously, there are different joins. In Power Query, they're called merges, but in the database terminology, they're actually called joins. And there's different kind of joins. So if I click on this drop down, you'll notice that there are 6 types of joins that you can do. Now let me go ahead and kind of describe what these joins are. Let me go ahead into PowerPoint and kind of show you what these joins kind of represent. So here we are, and we're looking at the join types. So when we do a Power Query merge, it gives you about 6 options of how to join 2 tables. So we have 6 types of joins: a left outer, a right outer, a full outer, an inner left ante, and a right ante. And these Venn diagrams, these circle diagrams, kind of represent what they would look like. So let me kind of go into detail of what these join types would be. So a left outer is probably going to be the default. That's going to be the one that is default chosen. And if your version of Power Query doesn't have these different options, it'll probably just have one, and then or 2 options actually. And in a previous version of Power Query, this was the default behavior. And this option would be closest to something like doing a VLOOKUP. So basically, you've got 2 tables, and you want to bring in columns from another table, and you're doing a VLOOKUP. So this is a left outer join. Now the second option is a right outer join, and you can think of this as the opposite. So you have 2 tables. You want to keep data from the right table and just bring in data from the left table. So basically, this is the opposite of a left outer join. Now the next one is an inner join, and basically this brings in everything from both tables. But pretty much you're just kind of combining these both tables together. Now the option is an inner join, where we are looking only at the matches between both tables and bringing those in and taking that output. So if your version of Excel doesn't have these 6 options, basically this is going to be that checkbox for the default, and then there's a checkbox that says choose only matching rows in the merge dialog. So this is that checkbox at the bottom if that's the only option that you have. Now the other type of join is the left ante. Now this option is the left ante join, and basically what it's saying is we have our table, our first table here that we're comparing with our second table, and if there are matches there, what it's going to do is it's going to take those matches out and just output whatever doesn't match, and just the rows that are in the first table. Now the right ante is basically the opposite of that. Our second table, if there's matches with the first table, it's going to take those out and just output the rows or the data with anything on the secondary table. So let's see this in action. What does all these different type of joins really mean in action? So I'm going to show you some examples. So here we are back in our merge table, and we're going to go and do the left outer join first. So this is going to be our first option, the left outer join. So once I click on that, what you notice now is it's going to bring in the table. In this new column, it's going to bring in the table from our country code table. And what I need to do is expand this to expand the columns out. So if I click on that, it's going to expand the columns out. And it's going to say new column. So what's going to happen is if I keep this checked, use original column name as prefix, it's going to say new column 1 dot country code and dot description. I can choose that, or I can change something else later on. So I'm going to keep all these options checked to let you see what it looks like. And we can do the editing later on. So I'll go ahead and click OK. And what you notice now, we have this new column dot country code. Let me go ahead and double click that to expand, or let me go ahead and just expand it out so you can see a little bit better. And then we have this new column dot description. So basically what it's done is it's take that country code column and then the description column and just added it here. And you'll notice now that we have our Brazil column, our Brazil data here that it's matched up to. Now, I really don't need this column when you really think about it, so I can just go ahead and right-click that and select remove. And since it said new column here, and all I need to do is add the country code, all I can do is just kind of double-click that and go ahead and just edit the header here. I'm going to go ahead and backspace there. And what I have now is the data that I need. Basically, what it's done is it's done the left outer join. It's brought in the country code from the other table. As I mentioned before, this is very similar to a VLOOKUP. So what I want to do here now is, if I want to output this as a separate table, all I can do is just click close and load, and it's going to bring it in as a new table here under sheet 1 with the country code. So very similar to a VLOOKUP. So as I mentioned, this is very similar to a VLOOKUP. Basically, I'm looking up the country name here and looking up the country name here and bringing back that country code there. So, or we can do this as some kind of lookup, maybe even an index and match or some other type of lookup capabilities in Excel. So that's the left outer join. So what does a right outer join look like? Let's go ahead and try that. So let me go ahead and go to Power Query, and let's go ahead and merge. And we can do many merges, and it'll basically output it as a different query. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my ship, and then I'm going to select my code table, my ship table, and my code table. Go ahead and select the columns that they are going to be matching, and I'll go ahead and do a right outer join. So a right outer join is going to be basically the opposite of a left outer join. So let's see what it looks like. So if after I click OK, you'll now notice that it's brought in the new column here. So I'm going to go ahead and click this to expand those columns. And right now, I'm going to uncheck that to show you what it looks like now. It's going to keep the original columns, and it's not going to have that new column dot country code or new column dot description. So go ahead and click OK, and let's see what it looks like. So basically, what it's done the opposite. It's kept many of the values from the secondary table, country code and description, and brought in the country part and quantity from the other table. So when we see Colombia was one of the entries there. It should be down here. Actually, Brazil was the first one. So we have Brazil. It's brought in the other values from that ship table. So basically, it's done the opposite. It's done a lookup. So basically, it's done a lookup of Brazil in the code table and brought over the different columns in the ship table, the country name, the part number, and the quantity. So basically, that's the right join there. And if I'm satisfied with that, I can go ahead and just close and load, and it's going to bring in another table. It's going to create another table with that value. So basically, this is the right outer join. So let's go for our third example, is the full join. So let's go ahead and go to Power Query, and then we'll go select merge. And then what we want to do is we want to merge the ship table again with the code table. We're going to select the matching columns, and what we want to do is we want to go do a full outer join. So it's basically just going to add the rows from both tables. As you can see here, we have our columns from the ship table. Let me go ahead and expand this so it will bring in the values from the other column. I don't want to use the prefix. Let me go ahead and also I'll go ahead and keep the country code and description here. Click OK. And what you'll notice now is it's kind of brought in values from both tables, right? So if I go in Brazil here, it's kind of just combine them both together. And let me go all the way down here. We have Colombia, we have Singapore, and we have Norway. So basically, just everything. It's brought in everything. Not much different from the left outer join, but let me show you an example of how it would bring in data and also just kind of combine it. Let me go ahead and close and load it here. And what we see here is it's brought in everything. Now, for example, let's go and add a country here to country shipments. Let's go ahead and add a country. Czechoslovakia recently changed their name, so they're called, I think, Czechia. And let's call this item, I don't know, item 6, and we'll give this a quantity of 100, right? So I'm going to go ahead and just go ahead and click data, and I'm going to just click refresh all. It's going to refresh everything, including the merge 1 and merge 2. So if I go here to sheet 3, which was my full outer join, let me go ahead and try to find Czechia. Let's see, maybe put it down to the bottom here. No? Ah, okay, right here. So what it's done is, since that was a full outer join, it's basically just combine everything together. And there's no values here. If you notice, there's no value here because the country code table doesn't have Czechia, right? If I go down here, it doesn't have Czechia. So basically what it does is basically just combine everything together, and that's a full outer join. Now let's go and see what a inner join looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and do another query. So let's go ahead and merge to do our inner join. Let me go ahead and go to Power Query, click on the merge command, and I'm going to look for the ship table. I'm going to look for the code table, select my countries here, and then I'm going to select my inner join. So my inner join is only going to bring those particular columns that match. So basically Chechnya will not show up. Any of the other columns that don't have a match will not show up. It will only show up for those 5 countries, I believe. So if I click OK, and we'll see our table here. Let me go ahead and click to expand this one. Unselect that, click OK. It's only going to bring in these 5 tables. That Chechnya row that I added, since there was no country code in the other table, it's not going to bring that in. So it's only going to bring in those tables. So that's the inner join portion of it. So if I click and load, or close and load, we have our table there. Now let's get into the anti-joins. Very interesting. I haven't actually heard the anti-join until I saw it in Microsoft here in the Power Query options. So if I go to Power Query and click on merge, I have my ship table here. I'm going to go ahead and select my code table here and select my countries for the matching columns. And if I do the left anti-join, you'll see what happens when we do the anti-join. Go ahead and click OK. And what it's done here, let me go ahead and click on the expand table here. I'm going to unselect that and click OK. You'll notice that it's only brought in Czechia. So basically what it's done is it's looked at the first table, the ship table, and anything that has a match, it's going to discount that. It's going to remove that, and it's only going to leave that Czechia row. So I'm going to go ahead and click close and load, and this is what it's done. Now the anti-right join, we'll see what happens there. Let me go ahead and go back into Power Query. So let me go ahead and click merge, and then my table is going to be the ship table. The other table is going to be the code table. Go to country on both, select that, and then the join kind, we're going to have the right anti-join. And once I click OK, now you'll notice that it has really brought in, let me go ahead and unselect that, click OK. It really has just brought in those values that show up on the code table. So anything that had a match, such as Brazil, it's not going to show up here. So if you notice, I go down here, Brazil is not going to show up. You see Brazil doesn't show up. Remember Singapore was also here at the bottom. Singapore does not show up. Oops, let me go ahead and go up here. Singapore does not show up, and of course Czechia does not show up. So basically what it's done is any matches that are in the both tables on the right side of it, if there's any matches to the ship table, it's going to remove those matches and just bring in the rows on the right side in the Venn diagram, the code table. Let me go ahead and click close and load, and it's going to load it as another table within the worksheet, sheet 6 here. So those are the different types of joins that you can perform under the merge capability in Power Query. Let me go ahead and just kind of review what they look like in the Venn diagram. So we're back here in the PowerPoint, and we're showing the different type of join types when we're doing a merge in Power Query. So we have our left outer here, which is only taking data from the leftmost table and also anything that matches with the other table. And we have our right outer, which basically is the opposite of that. And we have our full outer, which basically takes data from both tables. And we have our inner, which just takes the matches from both tables and outputs that. And then we have our left anti-join, which basically is we're looking at our first table, and if we have matches to our second table, we're going to take out those matches and just keep the values in the first table. And we have our right anti-join, which basically is the opposite of the left anti-join. We have data in our second table. If there's any matches to the first table, we're going to remove those matches and just keep the records from the second table. So in a nutshell, These are the different join types in Power Query when you use the merge functionality. So I hope that helps. Thanks for watching.